I'm speaking to Kenny Chiu. He is the head of the China Practice Group for the ENS. He also sits on the executive of the ENSAfrica. Welcome to the show, and it's really great to have you on board.
Thank you very much.
A lot of people are interested in terms of the Chinese strategy because, you know, that economy is largely misunderstood, but they've got a lot of resources and they're looking for a continent where there is resource. So we've seen a lot of development in Africa. Talk us through, in terms of the strategy around identifying sovereigns that have opportunity, the risk factors that are considered, and then what, for you, are the primary areas that we can potentially see some growth?
I think firstly, the Chinese companies and investors we're talking about now, they are very, very different to those who came to Africa 10, 15 years ago. You're talking about in the early 2000s, those are really state-owned enterprises. So they came to Africa with an agenda for securing raw materials and to feed the manufacturing hub in China. But what we're seeing now is those are new investors. They are private equity fund managers. Those are private investors. They would like also a share of the African story. So we see there's a gradual moving away from mineral extraction and mining to more consumer-based sector. For example, telecommunication, media, hospitality. And so they're looking for cash flow. Okay. So in other words, because...
So speaking to consumers, not just speaking to raw materials.
I think they understand Africa now is urbanization. It's very quick, you know, the urban area is expanding. So there's also concentration of people and consumer. So the Chinese are looking into partnership to explore this market. At the end of the day, if we look at the mining industry at the moment, it's actually pretty quiet, and then also the commodity prices are not doing any good to the sector.
Sure.
So I think there's a major shift of people looking into other sector. As I mentioned, telecommunication is an example.
So how do you identify the sovereigns that offer those best opportunities? So do you look at hindrances? Are there risks associated to those? Or do you look at Africa as a single continent?
I think Chinese would look at, for example, where is the most conducive place to do business. They look at very much going fast into Africa. For example, in East Africa, in Uganda, Burundi, those are the new hotspots.
But those are Central Africa, so there's a logistical issue, right?
I think they focus on the coastal area because it's easy to do export. It's still very much an import-export country.
Okay, so that's one of the key identifiers.
Yeah. South Africa, they're still coming here because of its conducive financial judiciary system.
Well, you have that infrastructure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, but they're using it as a hub to go into Africa.
But then if you look at the Chinese economy, I mean, there's also been a lot of infrastructure built. So I think the Chinese economy, from my perspective and my understanding, would be that you understand lack of infrastructure and how to create that to enable business to function more effectively. What is the contribution that they're making in Africa, do you feel, that adds to that in terms of the understanding of building a frontier market?
I think Chinese is working very closely with different government to help them with infrastructure. We all know that there are lots of resources in this continent, but the challenge is how to get them to the port. So they are assisting African country, you know, with road, with airport, ports and so forth. And very often, although they can't pay for those infrastructure, so there will be something like, you know, resource in exchange for infrastructure. So at the end of the day, your country still need those infrastructure, but instead of paying by cash, you're paying by mineral and
so
other
raw
resources.
And then talk to me about what your experience has been with regards to the cross-sovereign trade. So when we look at Africa, it is without a doubt something that there's different languages, different currencies, you've got different cultures, etc. Is this something that you find as a hindrance, or do you think that it's something that can be quickly overcome?
I think for Chinese, one of the biggest challenges for Chinese to operate in Africa is still the communication gap, and then also the cultural disparities. And having said that, it's not the language or English or French per se, but it's more the way how Chinese communicate and how Africa communicate to Chinese.
And are you talking then about data, or are you talking about creating infrastructure around capabilities for Wi-Fi, creating telecommunications, etc.? Is that specifically what you're gearing yourself around?
I think even before we reach that stage, it's more about on the negotiation table. Sometimes people just don't understand what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of misunderstanding. So once we clarify that misunderstanding and what we actually want to achieve, then we can move on to talk about the infrastructure like the Wi-Fi, like the data. And quite funny enough, you know, in the rest of Africa, the speed of internet is much faster than us here in South Africa.
It is.
So Chinese is finding other African countries are more conducive doing business. The government is more welcoming. They don't have very inflexible labor law, for example, but they still play their active role to create employment?
So then it's about the relationship, and as you mentioned before, I mean, China has been involved in the continent for some time. It's not a new relationship. So it is about building those relationships. I want to thank you for being with me.
Thank you so much.
And, you know, I look forward to the collaborative efforts that obviously from another sovereign look for the opportunities that we can create in Africa.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you
Kenny.
so much.